What's up guys, Maelstrom here. If you enjoy the video then like, subscribe and leave a comment down below so I can keep on making these awesome videos for you guys. Karasu stared at her opponents, quickly gauging their moves, strengths, weaknesses. She felt her fingers flexing in anticipation. This was serious. A single wrong move meant certain defeat, and defeat meant capture and torture or death. How exciting! Temari was a strategist. Her mind worked quickly and efficiently, scurrying over many possibilities. It meant she'd be able to navigate Karasu's weaknesses quite easily. She would have to be taken out first. Kankuro. Karasu found herself not even bothering with him. He was easy. Learning from Sasori, she had remembered his creations, knew where the traps sprung from and how a master puppet master could maneuver them. She only wondered whether she was facing the real one, or whether he had hidden himself in his puppets. If I get rid of those puppets, it'll take a few moments for him to collect himself. Then I have to get rid of the sister, and finish off the brother. It'll be as easy as taking sweets from a babe. Just have to wait for one of them to make the first move. All of that thinking took a second. Kankuro whipped out one of his puppets, clearly not taking any chances and bringing Salamander into play. At the exact same moment Temari flew into the air, hanging over Karasu's head for a few moments. The moment Kankuro let poison needles flying, Temari helped them along their way by flinging out her fan and summoning wind. Karasu smiled. She hadn't expected anything else. She let the needles run right through her. Kankuro and Temari were following it up, closing the distance. For a single moment they hesitated, seeing that the needles ran right through Karasu. She didn't move. She hadn't moved since she'd come here to face them. The little smirk played on her face like an illusion. They thought she was a badly concealed illusion. In fear and panic they whipped around to the trees and the barren rocks, expecting an attack from behind. The dark smirk widened as Karasu launched herself at them, at Kankuro, at the salamander and the crow. Kankuro! Temari screeched, having turned a millisecond after Kankuro. He turned around, eyes wide and mouth agape, facing a girl with wild hair as black as a raven's wing. Her hand darted out, faster than lightning, and smashed Salamander. In fear Kankuro jerked backwards, and Karasu whirled around to face Temari, who had unleashed her wind on her again. This time it was the sort able to cut forests down to firewood. Karasu let it pass through her again, and felt the needles and shuriken from Kankuro pass through her. He was well out of the way of the wind. Once again everything passed through Karasu's body without harming her. She felt their confusion mounting. How could she be a real physical creature, but not be harmed by their attacks? Temari was the first to realize she can change Kankuro. It's like she can make herself not exist and then be real. Temari screamed at her brother. He looked up at her with disbelief evident on his face. But what do we do? Kankuro asked, bewildered. This was a fight he'd never seen coming. Karasu didn't allow them any more time. You die! She snarled, vanishing in a cloud of black smoke. At the exact moment she vanished, she appeared again, right behind Kankuro, a poison-dipped kunai already in hand. She thrust it with all the strength from her legs, arms and back muscles right into Kankuro's side, the one that didn't hold the heart. Temari's scream was ragged and drawn out. She flung herself down towards her brother, intending to do away with the ninja who had brought him down. Suddenly the ninja appeared beside Temari, black hair streaming out behind her like a dark cloak. Her eyes held a malicious joy in them, and in her hand was a dagger. Temari flung herself from the ninja, but not in time to save her fan being sliced in half. The two females landed a safe distance away from each, and quickly stood to face the other. Karasu stood up languidly, stretching her muscles and yawning mockingly. Temari stood with every muscle taut, expecting an attack at any second. Her eyes never left the Akatsuki member, attempting to gauge every move. So looks like your brother's out for the count, eh? Karasu called over to Temari, walking closer to the fallen ninja. He was screaming and moaning in pain, the kunai still stuck in his side. The blood wasn't running yet. The weapon blocked the flow. However, the poison had entered his system, and it was what was causing him the immense pain evident on his face. Stay away from him! Temari demanded, seeing the enemy come into striking distance of her brother. Or what? You'll cut me down? Karasu teased cruelly, a grin spreading across her face like wildfire. I had been expecting more of a fight. Shame really. She pouted, leaning down to peer closely at Kankuro. He, seeing the Akatsuki above him, spat the blood that had pooled in his mouth at her. She dodged it without trying. Quick as a flash, her leg struck Kankuro's injured side, just below his injury. His screams were torn from his throat in a wild howl. Karasu laughed mockingly. "Don't touch him!" Temari screamed, running at the opponent. Instead of running from where she'd been standing, the clone vanished in white smoke and she ran from the small hiding area below the rocks that she'd found while in the air. For once a look of surprise spread over Karasu's face as she saw the incoming ninja, anger and hatred clearly written like a book in her eyes. The hand went back and struck forwards, like a striking snake, and buried itself neatly in Karasu's chest. Deathly silence filled the air as Karasu glanced down at the protruding kunai, and spurted blood from her mouth. Temari grinned, panting with exertion and anger, but most of all victory. This hadn't been as hard as she had anticipated. Akatsuki were meant to be these big, bad ninjas that no one could defeat, and yet here in front of Temari, with the kunai in her chest, stood one of them. One of those who was most probably associated with taking Naruto, changing him, contorting him. Most importantly, she was the Akatsuki who had struck down her brother as if he were nothing but a pestering fly. She was here, dying in Temari's hands, and it sent a thrill through her spine. "You know, you and I, we aren't so different." The Akatsuki woman spoke, her voice soft, menacing, and uncommonly humorous. "We are nothing alike." Temari spat, harshly burying the kunai further in the chest. The pain that the woman must have felt didn't even register in those cold, cold eyes. "Killing me. You enjoy it. I can see it. It's a thrill. You want this to last. You want to relive this death again and again and again. Just like I want to relive killing your pathetic brother." As she said the last words, the ninja spat blood on Temari's face and grinned, her shining white teeth dully reflecting the sun. Temari screamed in anger and thrust the kunai out of the ninja's body, letting her fall heavily to the ground. She stared down at the unmoving body, wrapped in the cloak. "I thought Akatsuki were meant to be difficult to kill. Looks like I was wrong." She spat, wiping her face and spitting on the body. With that, she ran to her brother, turning him over and staring at him. He was badly injured, the poison was seeping further into his system, the lightning blue trails snaking its way up the shoulder, to the bone. Soon it would find what it was looking for. The heart. Then everything would be over. She had to get him back to the Leaf Village, and fast. But what about Gaara and Naruto? What was happening there? It's alright, Kankuro. I'll get you back, just hold on." Temari begged, lifting up his uninjured arm and putting it around her shoulder. "Will you now?" The whisper was so close to Temari's ear that she could feel the hot breath of the speaker tickling the hairs there. She whirled around, knowing full well that her fan was out of reach. She grabbed for the kunai and shuriken, but they weren't there. She was defenseless. In an instant she felt a hot, spurting moisture drench her clothes. Looking down she noticed a trail of red blood, growing larger and larger with every second. Not just one, but many, perhaps hundreds. So many that the pain was doled out by all the warnings it was getting. Her hands were useless, her legs wouldn't carry her, and her heart was beating faster and faster. "Sweet dreams." The voice whispered again, the speaker once more behind her. Temari wanted to shudder. The love of killing was so clear in that voice it was almost poetic. Unfortunately she had lost the energy to do even that, and instead fell to the floor, backwards, onto her brother's arm. "How poetic!" Karasu whispered, staring at the two, before smiling wickedly and sauntering off, without a care in the world. "Naruto, you are with the Akatsuki?" Gaara asked, shocked, horrified even. "Am I? I hadn't noticed." Naruto mocked, turning around and peering at his garb with open, innocent eyes. Eyes that never lost their contempt or hatred. "Naruto, we searched for you. You do know that, don't you?" Gaara asked, stepping forwards. He was naive. Instead of seeing an Akatsuki member worthy of fear, he saw an old friend he had been missing, believing to be dead. A friend he had only mourned a few days ago. "Searched? No, that I don't believe." "Celebrated? Yes." Naruto spoke easily, lazily. This was a ninja he didn't fear, a ninja he had wanted to defeat and bring to the others for such a long time. This was his time, his moment, and nothing Gaara said nor did would stop this from happening. "No, we didn't celebrate. We mourned. There was a tribute to you. There has been for the last 3 years. Even was there, Sasuke, Kakashi, Sakura, Hinata, Neji, the whole village. People that you helped, that you changed because of who you were, who you are. Naruto, come back. They'll welcome you with open arms." Gaara was saying so much more than he ever remembered doing. This was so much different than any situation he had ever been in. He felt the words pouring out of his mouth, he unable to stop them. They came, and they were brimming with hopeful honesty, honest hopefulness. Naruto wasn't listening. He was imaging that night, seeing Kakashi walk away, not even look back at him. He was imagining Kakashi leaving him for dead. He remembered no one came to him, but out of the night had come two. Deidara and Sasori mourned? Naruto's voice had changed, so drastically Gaara reeled back as if he had been slapped. You'd never mourn me. The demon child, the one with the fox inside of him. You all would have been overjoyed at my death. Kakashi left me, Sasuke betrayed me, and Sakura only ever saw me as a stupid knucklehead. There was never love, never a team. He spat the last word as if it were poison on his tongue. Naruto, please. You and I are in the same boat, but I'm Hokage of the Sand now. I am proof. You can do what you set out to do. Come back, please. The last word was whispered, filled with a desperate plea to an old friend. No, Gaara. You're going to come with me, or you're going to fight me. What will it be? Naruto asked, his voice once again having changed. It was the usual calm confidence that would stop most ninja, leading them to believe there was something more to Naruto now, something that they hadn't anticipated. I can fight an old friend. Gaara whispered, still believing that Naruto, hearing that, would change his mind. Then come with me. I can't do that either. Then you have no choice. Naruto shrugged indifferently, before slamming chakra into the ground to boost him forwards at a speed which would leave most with whiplash. Gaara-san only just managed to defend him, coming up so that Naruto's fist gently knocked into Gaara's nose. Gaara's eyes widened fractionally. That blow hadn't been an all-out attack, it had been a test as to the speed of Gaara-san, and it had nearly gotten through. He couldn't hold back, not for this. There was no sand around their carefully chosen battlefield. Gaara realized that now. There was rock, probably for miles below them. There was coarse dirt, which sustained only the toughest trees on either side of them. Unless Gaara could somehow manage to crunch the rocks together to form sand, with dodging the coming attacks, he could only rely on that which he had taken with him. Naruto used the chakra again to slam himself away from Gaara, blue eyes cold and calculating. He didn't leave Gaara for room to think, as he launched himself once more at the red-headed boy, this time faster than before, dodging the sand that Gaara used to attempt to block him as if it were in slow motion. He flung his fist at Gaara with all his body weight and the extra momentum he had. He still held back. His hand knocked Gaara's head, rocking it forwards. Naruto hurried away again, dodging the sand. It was quick, and if he didn't choose the chakra on his feet it would certainly get him. I could keep attacking him like that, Naruto thought. But then again he had never expected to defeat Gaara like that. Gaara spread his hands. All the sand behind him turned swiftly around him, creating a half-shield. It would take a lot to get through that. It was intuition honed by hours, days, years of rigorous training that allowed Naruto to sense a change in the ground below him. He grimaced. He had given Gaara too much time to grind together sand. From now on, he had to be on the offensive and defensive, to make sure he couldn't make too much. He swung himself away from the ground on which he stood, preferring not to fly into the air without having a good reason. In the air it was harder to avoid things than when he was on the ground. Karasu would argue against that. Then again, she argued against most things that Naruto said. Where Naruto had previously stood, a giant torrent of sand slammed up from the ground, flying over his head as he backflipped over and over, finally hitting the ground at an angle, so he propelled himself towards Gaara. He was defended. The sand swirled around his ankles and took hold. A quick, violent burst of chakra from that area and the sand was useless, dead, at his feet. Naruto spun into the air, anticipating that the sand would charge after him, and discharged kunai with numerous explosions on them. When the sand came for him seconds later, he applied chakra onto his feet again and used it to run on the sand, flying down to the ground below. The sand piled around Gaara, like some writhing beast. You've improved, Gaara commented, neither hateful nor impressed. He was empty. It gave Naruto an immense satisfaction. You see now that the leaf Naruto never finished. He applied the chakra to his feet again, and at the same time created one of his Rasengans, without the need of a clone or two hands to control it, and smashed it through the outer layer of sand. His other hand held a Rasengan as well, and now he discharged it. Deidara, master of bombs, had been fascinated with Naruto's Rasengan. He had suggested training to make one into a bomb, and with many mouths of practice Naruto had finally made one. Deidara had watched every step of the way, and when he had been away, He'd always ask Naruto when he returned how it was going. It had made Naruto feel so important, like he was a true member of this team. He couldn't remember feeling that way with the leaf. The bomb went off, destroying the sand down to a molecular level. The power of it blasted Gaara away, further away than his sand could reach. It had to regenerate first, become sand once more. Naruto was shielded from the blast by using a cancelling jutsu, one that deflected the type of chakra that had just been discharged. This had been Heiden's idea, after the numerous occasions where Naruto had been blown in the opposite direction of his opponents. He launched himself at Gaara, who had knocked his head on a stone and fumbling to his feet, one hand held back behind the rest of his body. Once more he used everything he had, this time not holding back. Gaara's eyes widened as he saw the oncoming attack, and ducked just in time. It didn't slam into his face. It grazed off the cheek, shattering the bone underneath and the rock on which Gaara had been thrown onto. He grunted extremely loudly in pain, knowing that a wide-mouthed scream would only make matters worse. He swung himself away from Naruto's range, using the sand to propel him to safety. At the same time he brought the sand swirling around him to form a barrier. Naruto saw this and understood immediately that he wouldn't be able to shatter it without a full frontal assault, and that was nigh impossible with sand charging at him. He stood there, assessing everything with his ice-blue eyes. Gaara stared at Naruto in disbelief, not wanting to acknowledge the change in his friend. His old friend, the one who had brought him back from the darkness, who had taught him what it was like to have love, to be a good person. The person in front of him was completely different. A person filled with hate, rage and anger, all under control and seething under a roof of ice. The change was impossible, for this could be Naruto. Yet he knew, deep down, that it was. Naruto had changed, had been brainwashed, and this was the ultimate result. A powerful, revenge-hungry ninja. This revelation brought a tidal wave of fury forwards, not at Naruto but at the people who had done this to him. The fury shook the stones, crushing them together to fine dust. Naruto felt the ground underneath him shake, tremble as if in fear. He cursed silently. He shouldn't have let this go on for so long. He had been hoping that he'd be able to enjoy this, but finish him without ever really having to let go. Nothing to it then, he muttered, putting his hands to his side and beginning to form a Rasen shuriken. This one was different. It was filled with his type of chakra, the air. He wasn't going to yet resort to his summoning animal, not yet. It wasn't time. The sand suddenly burst forth from the ground, like an angry tsunami. Gaara was screaming in his cocoon of sand, fists clenched together and half raised to the sky in anger. Naruto cursed the boy quietly, and screamed Rasen shuriken, launching it with his own fury at the sand. Sand launched towards it, trying to cut it down. It sliced through it all, bringing it down to its molecular structures, disintegrating everything in its path. The more sand Gaara threw at it, the more he lost. In a last-ditch attempt to stop the glowing ball of rotating blue flame, Gaara threw up his ultimate defense. His mother's form, larger than a house, wrapped her arms around her son, baring her head to brace for impact. Impact it did. It was ear-shattering, a blast of white light, a fraction of a second of it, enough to warn the leaf that something amiss was happening. There was a crack, as loud as a thunderclap, and then nothing. All was deathly silent. No birds twittered, the rocks didn't shake, the sand didn't move, and the weapon was gone. Naruto stood, barely breathing heavily in his end, one hand held in front of him in case Gaara tried to attack in the gathering dust. Seconds ticked by where nothing happened, and Naruto began to wonder if he'd killed the freak with no eyebrows. The dust finally settled after half a minute, and Naruto saw the sand form of Gaara's mother. He cursed at it, wondering why his attack hadn't been able to penetrate. He was still thinking this when the sand began to crumble. It was slowly at first, a few grains trickling down lifelessly. Then, 2 more trickled and broke away 10 more grains, and from that it all began to collapse in on itself. Everything at once. Naruto breathed easier as he walked cautiously to where the fallen leader was, lying face down, back turned to Naruto. He was still breathing, which was a relief. Ungraciously Naruto turned the boy around, and stared at his face. The turquoise eyes were still open, still seeing. He was breathing heavily, clearly in a great deal of pain, his eyes squinting up at the person who he had once known. Naruto. Why? Gaara managed to whisper, hands clenching and unclenching by his side in pain. His voice was strong, clear, but the rest of his body didn't seem to be agreeing. You left me to die, and now I'm only repaying the favor. Naruto whispered, leaning down close to Gaara's ear, voice filled with something like evil intent. He brought his fist up and slammed it into Gaara's face, knocking him unconscious. That took longer than expected. You've really dipped into those reserves of chakra to get that lost move out. Karasu's bored voice sounded from further behind Naruto. The blonde boy picked up the body of the fallen and slung it over his shoulder, turning to stare at the raven-haired girl with the pretty dark eyes. I didn't want to stay around here longer. We're still too close to the leaf for my liking, Naruto replied, looking behind him at the village in the distance. He imagined the ninja running as fast as they could to the source of the light, scared out of their wits for reasons they didn't know. Have you dealt with the others? Naruto asked, already knowing the answer. If she hadn't, she wouldn't be standing there, for who knows how long already. She didn't grace his question with an answer. Do you want to stir these leaf up a bit? She asked, an evil glimmer in her eyes. Naruto grinned wholeheartedly, remnants of the old Naruto shining through in this one gesture. Where do I sign up, Miss Sakura? It's probably nothing. We don't have to go this fast. One of the medical ninja following Sakura and Sasuke's mad dash breathed out, clearly not in his comfort zone at this breakneck speed. We don't know what's happened, and the Kazekage and his siblings have only just left. We can't afford to be slow, Sakura told him, worry clouding her senses. What if they were all dead? She couldn't bear to lose old friends again. She knew a perfect ambush area, just up ahead. An outcropping of rocks, spanning some distance with coarse dirt and hardy trees on either side. There was not much sand available here, and if anyone was trying to attack the Kazekage, this would be the perfect place to do it. If there was nothing there, then she could rest a little easier and slow down the pace. As soon as she came across the rock outcrop, she sensed that something was off, and became thankful for her senses. She rushed ahead, Sasuke silently at her side. One look at his face and she knew that he had the same ominous feeling. Suddenly she heard something, quiet and a little further off, but distinctly a sound of immense pain and suffering. Her head snapped to Sasuke. His eyes had widened fractionally, indicating he had heard it too. Without a word they slammed themselves from standing to running, and in a few seconds they saw two limp and lifeless bodies close together. They were familiar, one sandy blonde and the other with dark cat ears. Temari and Kankuro. She ran to the first, Temari, and saw that she was only injured, not badly. She was alright. Her injuries were easy to fix. A few days in the hospital at the most. The other medical ninja, who were close behind her, could handle this one. Kankuro was the one who had moaned in agonizing pain, so far gone that even the smallest movement was something of horror. She carefully ripped open his shirt, and saw something that chilled her. Small tendrils of lightning blue, carefully curling themselves up Kankuro's arm. They were halfway up to his heart, and working painfully and quickly. Each arm had 1,000 different branches, roaming over his shoulder and down his chest. His breathing was labored, his heart was racing like a scared butterfly, and his eyes weren't able to open anymore. Oh no! Sakura whispered, staring at the unknown poison. What is it? Can you help him? Sasuke breathed, presence very close to Sakura. Under normal circumstances this would have sent happy chills running up and down her spine. Unfortunately this was too dire a situation to have those feelings. I don't know what it is, but it's working fast. I can treat him here. We need to get him back to the village, Sakura told him. She desperately wanted her mentor to look at him before she did anything. Help me lift him, Sasuke, she told him, running over to his chest and sliding her hands underneath his back. Sasuke didn't move. Sasuke, I need help, and so does Kankuro, Sakura begged snappishly. She was beginning to panic, to resort to frenzy. When Sasuke spoke, his voice sent chills down her spine. It was so quiet, so unbelieving. It was raw. Sakura, look, he whispered. In normal circumstances she would have snapped at him that this wasn't the time for sightseeing, but something in his voice made her stop and pause. She looked up, saw that he was staring into the forest with eyes wider than she'd ever seen them, and looked herself. What she saw made her breath and her heart stop. In the shadows was a person, standing there and watching them. He was wrapped in a black cloak with red clouds, and a Akatsuki member. Over his shoulder was Gaara, red hair slick with blood. It was neither of these things that caused the reaction, but the person who was staring at them, ice blue eyes filled with scorn and undeniable hatred. His whiskers were nearly invisible, and he had matured. He was handsome, and his blonde hair wasn't as unruly as it had always been. Naruto? Sakura whispered, rising so slowly from her crouching position. She took one step forward, then another. Sasuke was at her side, staring at the boy. He didn't seem to be in company of anyone else. Was it he who had single-handedly defeated Gaara, Temari and Kankuro? Was he even capable of causing this much pain to an old friend? Then Naruto turned his back to them and walked further into the shadows, so that he was invisible. Naruto! Sakura screamed, running quickly over to where she had last seen him. Sasuke was ahead of her, and they rushed into the forest, the branches and leaves and everything else slapping in their faces. They didn't notice the stinging pain, nor anything else for that matter. They only searched for the person who they had surely seen there. Naruto! Sasuke screamed, his voice wielding all of the raw emotion and pain he had suffered for so long. He had thought Naruto dead, because of his selfish actions and this stupid idea of revenge. Now it seemed as if he were alive, with the Akatsuki, but alive. But the goofy ninja was gone. They were chasing a mirage, the memory of a boy laughing and scratching the back of his head, the image of a boy who would never take no for an answer, the image of a boy they had grown to love unconditionally. After minutes of running after something that wasn't there, they stopped in the darkness, panting for breath and feeling with every fiber of their being that they hadn't been running after a shadow. They'd been running after something, but somehow it had escaped. Naruto! Sakura choked back on her sob. She was hunched over, just as Sasuke was, and her eyes were squeezed tightly shut. She was gritting her teeth, hoping the jolting effect and pain would diminish the tears. Perhaps it wasn't him? Sasuke gasped hopefully, eyes wide with disbelief as her stared at the forest. Was the forest darker than before? The shadows seemed longer, darker and thicker, like it was an actual, living being. It unnerved Sakura immensely, and she suddenly felt the indescribable need to leave the forest. Were those dark eyes there, by that tree? Or was it just the leaves? Of course it was him. How could it be anyone else? Sakura snapped without thinking, eyes raking the trees around her. The shadows were moving. She was sure of it, stretching slowly, so slowly, towards her, hands reaching out trying to grip the two ninja. I'm sorry Sakura, it's just we need to get back. Kankuro needs us, and if we have any hope of knowing what happened here, it's with him. Let's just head back, okay? Sasuke nearly begged. Sakura looked over at him, ashamed of herself, and saw that he was also uncomfortable with their surroundings. Straightening, she stretched her arms, looking at the last place she was certain she'd seen a wisp of blonde. All right, she whispered. Together they walked away, and the shadows stopped moving. Naruto watched them leave, saw their intuition grow as they realized something about this forest was off, that something was standing beside him, and he felt a swelling of pride for her, their ninja of darkness. She stared at the couple for several moments after they left, and finally her hold on the forest lightened and released. The birds returned, the small mammals scuttled back, uncertainly raising their heads every few steps. The shadows brightened to their normal selves. Karasu turned back to Naruto and looked at the red head. It took longer than I expected, to be honest, she told him uninterestingly. Naruto had learned that she'd been watching the entire time, watching and waiting for him to make his ultimate, killer move. He hadn't, and Karasu had been left disappointed. She hadn't seen it in a battle yet, and she desperately wanted to. Unfortunately, today hadn't been the day. What a shame. She'd expected a Hokage or whatever his blasted name was to provide some entertainment for them. I was waiting for him to get into his stride, Naruto said, a little abashed. Yeah, sure. You knew you may have been in trouble had he turned everything completely to sand. Karasu chortled, before striking off for their base. Come on, idiot. The others are waiting for the ritual to begin. Naruto grinned evilly, his blue eyes as bright as an inner flame. They sparkled and crackled. Let's not disappoint, and afterwards I'm going to have some fun. He grinned, turning around for one last look at the retreating forms. Then he laughed, a full, deep-throated laugh that began in his stomach and rose to his chest and throat. Karasu, walking just ahead of him, smirked at the sound. Oh yes, fun. Karasu's hand slammed out and hit Naruto square in the chest. The wind was knocked squarely out of him and released with an oof, leaving us thoroughly winded. When the breath returned to him in wheezing puffs, he managed to gasp, what the hell was that for? To the now still as a statue ninja beside him, she didn't move or even register his question. Her eyes were trained on a single area ahead of them. This instantly alerted Naruto, and he stayed in his hunched position, silently willing the trees to thicken to hide them better. If Karasu was like this, it meant that no one should move until she knew more. After several minutes, which seemed to take forever, Karasu motioned up and jumped, landing on the lowest tree branch and continuing until she was a fair distance up. Naruto joined her, and as soon as they landed and settled, lowered his chakra significantly. Now if he was detected, he would appear to be only a little bug. Karasu was much better at this. She had taught Naruto and everyone else in the Akatsuki the same technique. At the moment, Karasu didn't even exist. For an added effect, Karasu changed into a crow and looked harshly at Naruto. He held his hands up and watched her fly away. He waited there for 10 minutes. He didn't dare move. He wasn't sure what Karasu had sensed. She may have sensed someone belonging to the Imbu, or just some little newbie ninja. Whatever it was, it had alarmed her enough to take Naruto to shelter and then fly away in the form of a small, harmless animal to investigate. Whatever it was, Naruto refused to move or even breathe too loudly until his partner returned. When she did, she fluttered into her human form again, eyes a bright crystal blue. Her raven hair fluttered around her face, framing it beautifully. She looked excited, and Naruto felt his heart begin beating faster. "What is it?" Naruto whispered, leaning forward with eyes wide with his excitement. Karasu grinned back, flashing her sharp teeth. He noticed that her eyes were slowly changing to the solid black. That meant she was either angry, or ready for a fight. "It's another team that I think you may be familiar with," Karasu whispered with a low growl. That was her excitement showing through. "Stop being mysterious, tell me," Naruto demanded in an aggravated tone. Gaara's dead weight wasn't helping his mood, especially since Karasu refused to carry him, claiming it would hinder her scout's abilities. "It's Team Kyoaway or whatever her name is. It's the dude with the bugs and the other with the dog. Also that pathetic excuse for a ninja," Karasu whispered. Her eyes were now nearly there, pitch black. He nearly jumped for joy. It didn't matter that Karasu couldn't remember the name. Her description was spot on. It was Team Kurenai. "Brilliant, absolutely brilliant, Karasu. Let's get to work, shall we?" he asked, slowly rising to his feet and scanning the forest around him. He was certain that they'd be traveling in the trees. Akamaru was perfectly capable of leaping through the trees, and they'd always felt that method safer. Naruto quickly decided on what to do. "Where are they?" "Over there, 5 minutes away." Karasu pointed to a position that was behind them and to the right. "Brilliant. Hang this up. Give it to me on my command," Naruto said, ungraciously dropping Gaara on the large tree branch they were standing on and taking off his Akatsuki cloak. Karasu looked on disapprovingly. "You're going to trick them," she stated monotonously. She caught the cloak that was flung at her and slung it over her shoulder. "It's a perfect opportunity. Aren't you always the one that says take every opportunity that promises fun?" Naruto asked, taking something from his belt. It was his old headband, a long scar running through the leaf insignia. He grabbed a gritty silver substance from a pouch and rubbed it into the scar, smoothing it down and flicking off any excess before filling in the gaps in the insignia. "It looks rough," Karasu criticized. "I can do any better," Naruto said, sliding the headband over his head and letting it hang around his neck. He lifted his black shirt sleeve up and slit a small cut and begun rubbing it in his hair and over his face and neck. He then gave another slit and doubled the layer before wiping a kunai on it, broke the weapon and smeared his fingers in the blood. "Let's go," Karasu whispered, jumping down to the floor. She saw a small clearing and quickly made it appear as if a small fight had ensued. Naruto dropped beside her, checking the surrounding area for any sign of the team. They didn't have much longer left. "I'd say forgive me, but I don't care," Karasu said, and before Naruto could react, she tore at his clothing with her kunai. A potent poison on the blade made the blood congeal, so it appeared to have been done some time back. "That hurt," Naruto spoke in such a way that it seemed clear it hadn't. He had been trained to notice serious injuries, or those that could slow him down. These wounds were not of that sort. "You'll also need this," Karasu said, eyes perking. She heard the rustling of trees and knew she only had seconds. Without waiting for his confirmation, she whacked him over the head, hard enough to stun for a minute but not enough to seriously damage. Naruto, who had been expecting that much from his loyal partner, let this happen. He fell like a sack of potatoes, heavy body breaking the shrubs underneath him. Before anything else happened, Karasu wrapped herself in shadow, seemingly disintegrating into the darkness. Her chakra level dropped immediately, and she seemed to no longer exist. Team Kurenai weren't long in the waiting. Naruto was coming to when he heard them very close, and immediately he went limp, eyes fluttering closed. Hinata had been torn for 3 years. 3 years without watching the blonde-haired ninja from a distance, then becoming someone he considered a friend. Fighting alongside him had been ever better. Watching him grow had been a marvelous experience. Then he died. Every day Hinata wished that she could go back in time, go with Kakashi and carry Naruto back herself. She owed him so much. friendship and courage. To this day she still owed him so much, and she hadn't even been able to save him. That one little thing she could have done, she didn't. She choked back a sob and rested on a branch for a moment. Kiba and Shino waited for her. They too felt his absence. Not in the same way as Hinata, that was clear, but they felt a Naruto-shaped hole in their lives and it was never filled. "Hinata, we need to go." Kiba spoke gently, shaking her shoulder as lightly as he could. Hinata squared her shoulders and wiped her eyes and nose before standing up. Shakily, her knees shook before she took a deep breath and set her eyes straight ahead. The anniversary shook them all for several days after. "We weren't there, Kiba. We couldn't. We weren't there," Hinata whispered sadly, eyes staring at Kiba. He sighed and ran a hand through his hair. Shino said nothing, standing a branch away with Akamaru next to him. "I know. We can visit him as soon as we get back, I swear," Kiba promised. He had always intended to do so and leave a bouquet of flowers at the gravestone. It was one of the largest there was, with the sleeping nine-tailed fox above wrapped Naruto in its warm embrace. It was odd, but the Hokage had insisted that people remember him like that, as a boy who had something evil inside of him, but continued to smile and bring joy throughout his life. The statue of him was smiling with closed eyes, and the Nine-Tails was also smiling. The Hokage said that Naruto had probably tamed the fox inside of him, and that was why he was smiling as well. Everyone had accepted that, and everyone had remembered him like that. Kiba too believed that Naruto had perhaps made friends with the fox before his death. "Wherever he is, he's at peace." Kiba remembered Kakashi whispering on the day of Naruto's funeral, when it had rained for the whole day and the entire village had turned out. Unfortunately, the river had never given up his body, and everyone had lost hope. "All right, thank you, Kiba," Hinata whispered, gently patting his shoulder and leaping to the branch where Shino was. He gave her a swift pat as well and they set off again. When Kiba was sitting atop Akamaru, they set off again. Hinata saw a large crow wheeling close to them, eyes fixated on them before flying off into the distance, probably just protecting its nest. Shino told Hinata, seeing her staring at where the crow had been moments before. "It was a pretty large crow." "Beautiful, I think," Hinata commented. "In the village such crows weren't seen often." "The wild ones must be larger than the others," she thought. They traveled for another 7 minutes before they came across something almost unbelievable. At first they saw roughened terrain and slowed down immediately. If there had been a fight, the attackers might still be close, and they had to tread carefully. They looked all around the clearing, slowly and carefully. Akamaru didn't smell anything unusual, though his actions became more and more excited and worried and whingy. At one stage Kiba had to stop walking and look down at Akamaru, demanding an explanation. "Is Akamaru alright?" Shino asked, conversing with one of his beetles at the same time. Kiba frowned at his companion and shook his head unknowingly. "I don't know. He's acting off." He placed his hands on his hips and drummed his fingertips on his hip bones, staring at his companion completely clueless as to his behavior. Akamaru jumped forwards and stood beside a pile of trampled and crushed shrubs. "He's found something?" Hinata questioned shyly, incredibly curious and scared. She had never truly overcome her fears and shyness. She was still that girl from 3 years ago, she was sure. "Akamaru, what is?" "Oh shit." Hinata Shino. "Come here." Kiba suddenly screamed, lunging down and tugging at a body, turning it this way and that. Hinata saw black cloth, torn and bloodied. She hastened and almost instantly saw what had been the commotion. "Is that it? Could be," Hinata whispered, trembling all over. She felt an overwhelming rush of relief, disbelief and shock. So many more emotions that she couldn't pick out flooded over her, overwhelming each and every single one of her senses so that she fell to her knees and stared at the young man lying in pools of congealed blood. She began to laugh and cry all at the same time, shoulders shaking harshly. "Oh God, it's Naruto!" Shino gasped, dropping to his knees and pulling the injured boy from Kiba's grasp. He still wore his Konoha headband. It was hanging around his neck. It looked scratched, but then again he'd been a rogue for 3 years. It was a miracle he was still alive. Shino wrenched Kiba's shaking hands from Naruto and he quickly looked him over. He was by no means an expert, but since Hinata and Kiba seemed to be incapable of doing anything, he decided he had to do something. He stretched out a hand and found it was shaking. He formed a quick fist and bit it, hoping that would calm his nerves. His heart was nearly beating out of his chest. He touched the boy who looked so much like Naruto and turned him on his back. If he started to choke he'd put him in on side again, but for now he wanted to look at the face. Faint whiskers on his cheeks, bright yellow hair that was spiked. It had to be him. It was. Naruto wasn't dead, he was alive. Quickly Shino checked the injuries. It looked brutal, but not deadly. Whatever had happened, he'd only been cut and then knocked out. Probably happened a few hours ago according to how the blood was acting. He was just knocked out, harshly, and perhaps thought of as dead, but he wasn't in harm's way. It's alright, he's just knocked out and beaten up, Shino informed the others, breathing a sigh of relief. They weren't about to lose him again. It's Naruto, isn't it? That's Naruto. He's alive, Hinata whispered, crawling over to the body and lifting the head onto her lap. She stared down at him, memorizing everything she could. The feel of his pulse, beating strongly, and his soft breathing. His soft skin and silk-like hair. He had grown so much. His body was hardened, tougher than before, and the laugh lines that had once been so prominent were all but gone. He looked serious and stern, but then again he'd been living as a rogue for 3 years. Hinata wondered how he had come back from the dead like he had. According to Kakashi, there was no way he could have survived without outside help. Had he had outside help? Oh man, it's him, Kiba breathed, and he's been fighting. He looked at the kunai in Naruto's grasp. It was covered in blood. Sometimes it's necessary, Hinata defended weakly. Kiba said nothing, instead poked Naruto's limp body. We can't stay here. We need to take Naruto back to the village. He's been through a lot, Kiba says, staring at the body and wondering how to move it. At that moment the tiniest groan escaped Naruto's lips, and his closed eyes fluttered. Hinata gasped and dropped his head. Luckily the ground was soft with specks of moss dotted around, so it did no further damage. However, it pushed a louder groan from him, and his breathing became louder. His eyes fluttered slowly open, and any hesitation in who it was instantly discarded. His eyes were a bright blue, the same blue that Hinata dreamed of. His eyes closed again and he groaned once more, arms shaking and grasping the other as if he were hugging himself. He opened his eyes again, this time the pupils moving to focus on the swirling faces above him. What? He croaked hoarsely. Hinata began to laugh and cry again, and Kiba buried his face in Akamaru's fur. Shino didn't move, only stared at the young ninja, wondering how he had survived everything and not come back to the leaf. Not come home. Naruto, are you alright? Kiba asked, lifting his face from Akamaru's fur. Naruto stared at everyone, confused and baffled. Who? Naruto whispered, before shakily lifting himself into a sitting position. He was hunched over with his arms resting lazily in his lap. He stared at everyone and winced, some pain hindering him. Naruto, it's me. Kiba. Kiba rushed forwards and knelt before Naruto, staring intently into his eyes as if trying to communicate like that. Kiba, Naruto whispered, looking down at his hands. Akamaru? He whispered, looking up into Kiba's eyes and narrowing his. Kiba laughed breathlessly for joy, and so did Hinata. Yes, that's right. This is Akamaru. Kiba motioned for the dog to come forwards, and he did so slowly, tail low to the ground and wagging slowly back and forth. Akamaru, he's grown, Naruto whispered with a tired little grin. His eyes were drooping shut before he snapped them open again, furiously intent on staying awake. Has he? I haven't noticed. Kiba looked at his partner with admiration. Naruto, do you remember me? Hinata asked, rushing forwards to crouch next to Kiba. Naruto squinted his eyes at her before nodding slowly. Hinata, right? And Shino? Naruto remembered. Hinata laughed again and refrained from hugging him. Yes, I'm Hinata, and that's Shino. Naruto, what happened to you? Hinata asked, getting straight to the point that was bothering everyone. Silence prevailed. Even Shino took the time to look interested. Naruto seemed to be fumbling for words, his mind slowly coming back to him. Well, where do I begin? So much. Naruto whispered the last 2 words, lifting one hand up to rub gently at a spot on his head where they all assumed him to have been it. Don't worry, you can tell everyone once you're better, Kiba quickly assured him. Everyone? Naruto looked up and around as if expecting the village to magically appear around him. Kiba and Hinata laughed loudly. Shino stayed silent. He was watching Naruto carefully. He wasn't sure why either. His bugs were uncomfortable. They didn't want to be there. Whether it was the area or Naruto, Shino wasn't sure. He looked around the clearing again, looking for any sign of anything peculiar. There wasn't any blood spattered around the clearing. In a fight like the one Naruto had, there would have had to be blood where the other shrubs were crushed. It only looked like someone had trampled the whole place and then thrown Naruto where he lay now. There was a dark shadow next to them. It looked like a normal shadow from a tree, no human form inside it. Only difference was this one was much darker. His bugs couldn't detect any chakra. Naruto watched Shino and knew that his mind was seeing things that didn't quite add up. Shino? Naruto asked. Shino turned to look at his old friend. There was no way that that couldn't be Naruto. No matter what else might be going on, Shino was certain that this wasn't an illusion or a shadow clone made to look like Naruto. Naruto. Shino nodded. Naruto coughed. Shino crept forward so that his knee was nearly touching Naruto. Shino, I'm sorry. Naruto whispered. The last word was completely different from the tone that the ninja had been using before. This word was dripping in hatred and contempt. The change was so quick and so shocking Shino didn't know how to react. His mind fumbled with everything, because the Naruto he knew would never hurt a friend. Someone so good and innocent would never have been able to change so much. It was only a millisecond difference. If Shino had acted immediately, he would have been able to stand a better chance than he did. Naruto thrust himself forwards, kunai in his hand once again becoming the deadly weapon. It sheared through Shino's skin and tissue like a hot knife through butter, thrusting up into his chest. Naruto missed the heart on purpose. Discarding the knife, Naruto leapt back, away from Shino's bugs. Hinata screamed in horror. Kiba launched forwards to grab Naruto. He was about to reach out and touch him when something from behind coiled around every limb and fastened strings, usually used for fishing, and on the ends were kunai. They jolted him back and brought him crashing to the ground, giving him thousands of tiny cuts all over his body. Akamaru barked angrily and flung himself at the shadow that had appeared, but it disappeared underneath his paws. Then it was suddenly standing on his back and he snapped up, jaws clasping around nothing. Kiba stood on his 2 feet shakily and set off to help his partner, but he never arrived. 2 kunai sheared through his ankles, stopping him in his tracks and preventing him from putting any pressure on his legs. He screamed out in pain and fear, turning around as quickly as he could to see Naruto standing over him. Naruto smiled grimly, his eyes suddenly turning from their innocent selves to ones of pure hatred and anger. The wires coiled themselves around his body again, holding him to the ground. He tried to fight, tried to bring his hands together to use some signs, but they didn't move. He heard Akamaru give a frightened yelp and then another, the second filled with pain. He felt the body of his partner hit the ground heavily. He heard Hinata screamed. Naruto leaned forwards and stared at Kiba. The Konoha ninja couldn't look away from those blue orbs, so close up and swirling with the fury that was just below the surface. Naruto? Kiba croaked fearfully, uncertainly. You left me for dead. Now you suffer the same fate. Naruto hissed in his ear, so quiet Kiba could have missed it. He didn't, however, miss the words that dripped with hatred. It was so frightening Kiba began to shiver. Naruto stood up again, and the other assailant walked over to him. She was beautiful, but as cold as ice. Her eyes were black shards, and she wore the familiar black cloak with red clouds. She handed one to Naruto and he put it on with a flourish. The girl vanished in a puff of black cloud. Naruto walked over to Hinata, who quickly stood up and moved into her gentle fist stance. Kiba saw that there was no possibility of her defeating the yellow ninja. He walked with an air of confidence that had never been there before, calm and completely in control. Hinata tried to attack, but he caught every single one of her attempts and deflected them with an air of boredom. Hinata sprung back and stared at Naruto. Naruto, what are you doing? Why are you doing this? Hinata cried, eyes changing so she could see his chakra. Oh Hinata, you always were a daft imbecile. Naruto spoke gently and calmly, his voice soothing. Hinata lowered her hands, her eyes returning to normal and brimming with hurt. Naruto, she whispered, trying desperately to hold back her tears. Naruto flew forwards, a kunai in his grasp. Hinata saw it coming, tried to deflect it but wasn't prepared for the lightning-fast kunai that came from her other side. She cried out, and Naruto pierced the other in the other side. She now had 2 sticking out just below her ribs, the blood seeping out. Naruto hit her harshly on the head, stunning her but not knocking her out. Hinata fell to the floor, hair fanning out around her as she lay stunned. The female ninja came back, this time carrying Gaara. Kiba fought even harder against his restraints. The more he fought, the deeper the strings cut. They weren't budging, weren't allowing him to move a finger. He now realized how bad the situation was. Gaara was beaten and bloodied. Truly this time he was hanging limply and carelessly over Naruto's shoulder. He turned to leap up into the trees and away when Kiba suddenly screamed his name. The sound tore from his throat, ripping through everything like a sound wave. The birds overhead fluttered away. Naruto turned to look, and that was when Kiba realized there was no hope. His eyes showed the difference 3 years had made. Kiba could only stare as the ninja he had once called a friend jumped away, a Akatsuki cloak fluttering out behind him. Kiba sobbed and tried to look over his shoulder. He could just make out Akamaru's form, and it was rising and falling. His buddy wasn't dead, he had been left alive. They all had, but badly wounded. Even Kiba. If left like this for too long, he knew they'd all be dead soon. "Oh God, someone please help us," Kiba whispered, a single tear sliding from his eye and down his cheek. That's the end of this part, guys. If you want the next part, then like, subscribe and leave a comment saying so. This is Maelstrom signing off.